So the other day, did a post on the female post was about a Mobility WOD video in which Kelly Starrett was working with Jenny LaValle, who was a CrossFitter, and she had this issue when she was pulling that she was hyperextended or maybe a little hyperlordotic in her back. And so in order to anchor her on more muscular than just her hamstrings, he was having her rotate her femur out. So to externally rotate her hip to provide that torque which distributes the force more effectively across the musculature in the hips to bear more load and apply more force in pulling movements like the deadlift or the clean. So I'm deadlifting now and realize that this is also dependent on stance width. So I've talked about that before in seminars and question and answers where too wide of a stance width is not going to allow a person to get their knees out, or in other words to get their hips externally rotated, which lets them set their back flat. So that's important for tight people. But when we're considering the over-flexible people, the external rotation is important to help them recruit this musculature and solidify their trunk more. And that's what Kelly was talking about. But that's dependent on stance width. So if someone has too wide of a stance and they're down here ready to deadlift, typically their knees are going to track in from their feet, and then that's loading incorrect stuff and not distributing the load across not only their thighs and their hamstrings, but they're actually the external rotators of their hip here in the glute area. So if you are coaching someone or you're actually deadlifting, your deadlift stance should be hip width. And squat stance is about shoulder width, and deadlift stance is about hip width. So mine is pretty much right about here. So another thing that stance width affects is the distance in which a person has to pull the bar, because the wider the stance is, then the wider the grip is, and then the more distance that the person is going to have to deadlift the bar. So I mean, if I snatch grip deadlift, look how high I have to pull the bar, and if I regular deadlift, I don't have to pull the bar as far. So stance width is important, and it always has been in the deadlift, but now it has even greater importance because it's imperative to have a hip width stance in the deadlift in order to have that external rotation in the hip, in order to distribute the force and get more effect, more efficiency out of your lift. So you're going to work more musculature, you're going to get more musculature stronger, you're going to have more force in order to move the bar, and you're going to be safer too. So all these things are dependent on the stance width so that you can more effectively externally rotate the hip.